Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into an incredible armored dinosaur, Akainacephalus johnsoni.
Yeah, this one's fascinating. A relatively recent find from Utah.
We've got the main source here, the original 2018 description paper by Wiersma and Ermes.
That's the one.
And our goal really is to figure out what makes this thorn-headed dinosaur special and, what it tells us about that whole late Cretaceous period in North America.
Exactly. It's actually shifting how we think about dinosaur evolution back then, especially how they moved around. We'll focus on what that original paper lays out.
Okay, great. So let's start with the discovery. Finding this thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't simple, was it?
No, not at all. It took several field seasons, 2008 through 2010. They found it in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in Utah, specifically the Horse Mountain Griposaur Quarry.
And why is this find such a big deal?
Well, mainly because it's the most complete ankylosaur ever found in what we call southern Laramidia.
Laramidia,
Right.
That's the western chunk of North America back then.
Precisely. An inland sea split the continent, and finding such a complete skeleton in that southern part, well, it's huge for paleontology.
And it's safely stored now, I assume.
Oh, yes. The holotype, that's the main reference specimen, UMNHVP 2022, is at the Natural History Museum of Utah in Salt Lake City.
Okay. And how complete are we talking? You said most complete.
Yeah, complete is always relative with fossils, But they recovered about 45% of the skeleton. That's actually a lot to work with.
45%. That sounds pretty good. What sort of bones do they actually recover?
They got a fantastic skull, both mandibles, the lower jaws, the predentaria bone at the front of the lower jaw, vertebrae from the back, the hip region, the base of the tail and further down the tail, dorsal ribs too,
Okay.
and crucially, a complete tail club.
Wow. The whole club.
The whole thing. Plus, both shoulder blades, a coracoid, a humerus, the upper arm bone part of an ulna, part of the ilium, which is the hip bone, a femur, tibia, a rather poorly preserved fibula, a toe bone, and then parts of the armor rings and other armor plates from the back and sides.
That is quite a list. Really gives you a sense of the animal. So, the name, Akainacephalus johnsoni. You called it thorn-head. Let's break that down.
Right. Akainacephalus, it's from Greek, akaina, meaning thorn or spine, and kephale, meaning head.
Thorn-head. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's all about the spiky, bony plates, the capitegulae covering its skull. We'll definitely get more into those.
And the second part, johnsoni.
The person.
Yes, exactly. It honors Randy Johnson. He was a volunteer preparator at the museum.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, he did a huge amount of work preparing the skull and jaws. A really nice tribute to that effort.
Absolutely. Okay, thorn-head, got it.
Well,
So what really sets Akainacephalus apart from its armored cousins? What are the unique defining traits?
Well, the describers, Wiersma and Ermes, they pinpointed several key things. Some are autapomorphies, unique characteristics found only in this dinosaur.
Okay, like what? One of the most obvious ones is the supraorbital bosses, the bony bits above the eyes.
Right.
In Akainacephalus, they're massive from the side view. They form this high, sort of swept-back ridge that extends sideways right over the eye socket, covers the front top corner and the back edge of the eye, like super heavy-duty armored eyebrows.
Armored eyebrows.
Yeah.
What else?
The cheek horns are different, too. They're triangular, but they point almost straight down. Very specific orientation.
Pointing down. Interesting.
And then on the frontal bone, right in the middle, there's a single, large, flat, hexagonal osteoderm, one of those bony plates. That specific shape and location is a key trait.
A hexagonal plate right on the forehead. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, the whole top of the skull, the frontal and nasal bones, it's covered in these tightly packed, pyramid-shaped and cone-shaped capitegulae, and they're arranged symmetrically.
Okay.
The nasal bones also have this really distinct central row of cone-shaped capitegulae, neatly separated from the plates on either side.
A central line of cones.
Exactly. And one last thing, a bit technical. At the back of the skull, where the spinal cord enters, part of that opening, the foramen magnum, is angled. It sits sort of obliquely above and slightly in front of the occipital condyle, the knob connecting to the neck.
Okay, those are some very precise details. Let's dive deeper into that skull, especially the ornamentation. You mentioned those rows of capitegulae.
Right. The skull is really where Akainacephalus shows its unique style. Besides those autapomorphies, the top and sides have these symmetrical rows of small pyramid and cone-shaped plates. And the nostrils, the external nares, they face sideways, not forwards. They're also kind of small and teardrop shaped. That's actually similar to another ankylosaur, Notocephalosaurus.
Sideways teardrop nostrils, got it.
And there's this little fragment of bone on the back edge of the left nostril. It suggests it might have had internal openings between the nostrils, like Pinocosaurus and Minotaurosaurs.
Hmm. Internal openings. Any idea why?
Well, it's debated. Maybe related to airflow, maybe sense of smell, maybe even vocalization. Hard to say for sure. So, framing those nostrils are bony plates called supranasal capituli. The eye sockets are almond-shaped, and because of some fossilization quirks, the cheekbones, the jugals, sit a bit higher than the lacrimals and the bones in front of the eyes.
Right. Things can get squished over millions of years.
They certainly can. Up front, the premaxillae, the very tip of the upper jaw, they taper a bit to form a narrow U-shaped beak.
Uh-huh.
And the maxillae, the main upper jaw bones, have 16 tooth sockets each. They curve inwards on the sides, giving this sort of hourglass shape when you look from above. That's seen in other ankylosaurs too.
Hourglass jaw. Okay. What about around the eyes and cheeks? More armor.
Oh, yeah. The lacrimals have a tetrahedral-shaped plate, kind of four-sided pyramid shape. It's a bit different from Notocephalosaurus, though not as easy to see from the side, and smoother.
Okay.
Behind the eyes, the postorbitals are decorated and smoothly connect with the ornamentation on the jugal, the cheekbone. The jugals themselves are broad and form a shelf with a ridge of rough fused bone. And the quadratojugal, another cheekbone, projects forward a bit. It would have been part of the cheek horn structure, but like we said, those horns are damaged, so we don't see the full shape.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces sometimes.
Yeah.
What about the snout itself?
Yeah. The nostrils are bordered by that supranasal capitulum. It's mostly smooth, just a bit rough. Next to it is that tetrahedral lacrimal plate. Then along the top of the snout, you have 8 plates arranged symmetrically, separated by smaller pyramid-like ones.
Okay.
And down the midline, there's that row of larger hexagonal plates pointing backward. On the sides, more polygonal and pyramid-shaped plates. And there's one nasal plate sticking out sideways, making the nostril look flared from the side view.
Very complex pattern.
It really is. Towards the back, near those big supraorbital bosses, there's a triangular plate with a keel on the prefrontal bone. And another interesting one, a bulbous plate with a hexagonal base surrounded by 6 smaller ones. The neutral shelf, right at the back edge of the skull roof, isn't super rough, and it has 3 sort of poorly preserved, rounded to elongated plates.
Every surface seems armored.
Pretty much. The ring around the eye itself is a complex of that supraorbital horn, the lacrimal plate, the jugal osteoderm, and a thickened rim. The postorbital horn behind the eye is formed by fused supraorbital plates. We mentioned the squamosal horns at the back corners, and the quadratojugal horns are damaged. Underneath the supraorbital boss, there's a small plate with a fine texture, and the jugal plate underside is concave and forms a little shelf.
Okay, there's a ton of skull detail. What about the lower jaw, the mandible?
Right, the quadrates, part of the jaw joint, you can see them from the side. They're robust and lean forward quite strongly.
Okay.
The mandible itself has a triangular plate with a blunt keel, but it's shorter than in some other ankylosaurids. Then there's the predentary at the very front, the beak part of the lower jaw. Its back surface is smooth, and it's pretty straight across, typical for ankylosaurids. We don't know the exact tooth count because of erosion, but the back part of the jaw is tall, formed by the syringular and dentary bones making up the coronoid process. Another bone, the prearticular, forms the back part of the jaw joint area.
Okay, so a heavily armored head, unique patterns. Let's move down the body. The postcrania, what about the backbone?
Okay, vertebrae. The ones in the posterior neck are spool-shaped with a distinct keel underneath. The dorsal vertebrae from the back are also spool-shaped, but look more oblong front to back, sort of laterally compressed. And they have this really unique feature on the underside, near the back surface, a sort of recurved, hook-like projection, then a keel running along the length. Not seen in other ankylosaurids, usually.
A hook on the vertebrae. Weird.
Yeah, it's distinct. And some of these back vertebrae actually have ribs fused right onto them. The fused ribs have a T-shaped cross-section.
Fused ribs. Must have made the torso very rigid.
Definitely. Then you get to the synsacrum, the fused hip vertebrae. It's made of 4 dorsosacrals, 3 true sacrals, and 1 caudosacral vertebra. They're all fused solid, the lines between them almost invisible, which might mean this was a mature animal.
Okay.
The ribs attached here have broad surfaces for connecting to the ilium, the hip bone. They have a less pronounced T shape than the dorsal ribs.
And the tail. leading up to the club?
The caudal vertebrae, the tailbones, are short but tall, kind of boot or spool-shaped, slightly concave on both ends. They have tall neural spines sticking up. The
Yeah.
ones closer to the body are sort of ellipsoid in shape.
Got it. Strong backbone. And the ribs you mentioned.
The ones further forward have that T-shaped cross-section, wide on top, not too sharply curved. Further back, they become more L-shaped and curve more sharply. Suggests their position along the rib cage.
Makes sense. Different shapes for different functions. How about the shoulders and limbs?
The scapulae, the shoulder blades, are curved. The acromion process, a projection on the scapula, sits right above the shoulder joint and points upward. The blade itself is paddle-shaped.
The coracoid, another shoulder bone, is squarish and fused to the right scapula in this specimen. The humerus, the upper arm bone, is robust. Big deltopectoral crest for muscles, thick shaft. It also has a large projection on the back underside of the humeral head and a big round bump on the side of the crest, likely for the latissimus dorsi muscle.
It seems like powerful arms for supporting all that armor. Lower arm. Feet!
Less complete there. We only have the olecranon process, the pointy bit of the elbow and part of the ulna shaft, but the notch for the radius looks similar to other ankylosaurs, and just one foot bone, a phalanx, wider than long, concave articular surfaces.
Okay, so bits and pieces of the limbs.
Yeah.
But you said the tail club was complete.
Yes, which is fantastic. It consists of the handle 11 fused tail vertebrae, just like in Diplodocus, and the knob.
11 vertebrae in the handle.
Yeah, makes it stiff. And the knob is formed by 3 large osteoderms, 2 lateral ones and 1 terminal one at the tip. The handle vertebrae are long and spool-shaped, about twice as long as wide.
And the handle is reinforced, like in other ankylosaurids. Elongated presygapophyses, bony projections, overlap extensively with the vertebrae in front. The chevrons underneath are also interlocked and compressed into rods, adding rigidity.
So a very stiff, reinforced handle.
Exactly. The big osteoderms at the knob are fused to the last 2 vertebrae. These main plates are longer than wide, rounded on the sides, and convex, bulging outwards. That's different from Anodontosaurus, which has flatter ones. The end plate is much smaller, wider than long, and diamond-shaped.
Sounds like a serious weapon. What about the body armor plates, the osteoderms, besides the club?
We have parts of the cervical half rings, the neck armor, both an anterior and posterior one, though the edges are broken. Each seems to be made of 6 fused osteoderms. They don't have those sawtooth edges you see sometimes. They have these bulbous oval spots where smaller secondary oval osteoderms would have sat.
Layered armor on the neck.
Seems like it. Beyond the neck, we only have 14 other osteoderms identified. They're all tall, with strong keels. Probably from along the back, sides, maybe even the forelimbs. They fall into 3 main types based on shape. Type 1 are like pup tents with S-twisted keels pointing backward. 5 incomplete ones, probably from the chest-shoulder area. Type 2 are triangular and flattened. 8 partial ones, maybe from the sides of the body and tail, similar to ones seen in Tarchia, Cycania, and Sculosaurus.
Right.
And type 5, just one fragment. Flat base, off-center keel, resembles dorsal armor from Sculosaurus.
A whole toolkit of armor shapes.
Huh.
Okay, let's put this animal in context. Where does Akainacephalus fit in the grand scheme? Phylogeny, biogeography?
Okay, this is where things get really interesting and maybe a bit controversial. The original 2018 paper placed Akainacephalus and Nodocephalosaurus together in the southern Laramidian group.
Right, both from the south.
Exactly. But the surprising part was their analysis suggested this southern group was actually more closely related to Ankylosaurs from Asia than to the Ankylosaurs found in northern Laramidia, like Ankylosaurus itself or Euoplocephalus.
Wow. So not related to the northern guys.
Not as closely, according to that study. It implied a separate migration event from Asia, specifically into southern Laramidia. This really bolsters the idea of dinosaur provincialism, that the North and South had distinct dinosaur communities.
Like 2 separate evolutionary tracks happening on the same landmass.
Pretty much, yeah. The idea is that maybe geographic barriers or environmental differences kept them somewhat separate, but it's not totally settled.
All right, yes.
Yes. A 2019 study by Park and colleagues put Akainacephalus and Nodocephalosaurus in a more basal position, sort of an earlier branching group relative to Cycania, Tarchia, and others, including some Asian forms. Their view suggested maybe the migration from Asia happened earlier, maybe even in 2 waves.
Okay, so different placement on the family tree.
Right. And then another analysis in 2022 by Frauenfelder and colleagues placed Akainacephalus as a sister taxon, a close relative, to 2 big clades, one including Zecontegia, Nodocephalosaurus, Talururus, and another with more advanced ankylosaurians.
So the exact relationships are still being debated.
Definitely. It highlights how complex figuring out these family trees can be and how each new fossil can shift our understanding. But that connection to age and forms, in some capacity, keeps popping up. It suggests movement across continents was happening.
Fascinating. Okay, what about the world Akainacephalus lived in, the paleo environment?
It lived during the Upper Campanian stage of the Late Cretaceous. The rocks, the Kaiparowits Formation, are dated pretty precisely to around 76 million years
Oh,
ago.
what was that environment like? Not desert Utah like today, I imagine.
Not at all. It was a very wet, humid environment. Think coastal plains, large rivers, swamps, lakes, ponds, all draining eastward into the western interior seaway, that big inland ocean.
So lush and swampy.
Very much so. We find lots of aquatic mollusk fossils, tons of aquatic vertebrates like turtles and crocs, and plant fossils that point to a wet climate. It was roughly contemporaneous with famous northern formations like Dinosaur Park or Judith River.
And who else was living there? It must have been crowded.
Oh, it was an incredibly diverse ecosystem. You had other dinosaurs like the Hadrosaurs, Griposaurus, and Parasaurolophus, various ceratopsians, horned dinosaurs like Utaceratops, Cosmoceratops, Nasutoceratops.
A lot of big herbivores.
Absolutely. Another ankylosaur and a Dinosaurus was there too, plus an indeterminate nodosaurid, other ornithopods, small runners like Scalodromius, oviraptorosaurs like Hagraphis, troodonids like Talos, early birds like Meros,
Wow.
and the big predator, the Tyrannosaur teratophonius, plus ostrich-like ornithomimids.
Quite the community. Any non-dinosaurs of note?
Loads of turtles. Boromys, Arvanasheles, Dinoxinomes, Neuranculus, Oticus, Basilames. The list goes on. Giant crocodilians like Dinosuchus were lurking in the water.
Dinosuchus. Okay, definitely some danger there.
For sure. And even giant pterosaurs, the Asdarchids soaring overhead. It was a really vibrant, complex world.
It certainly sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What are the main takeaways from our deep dive into Akainacephalus?
Well, I think there are two main things. First, Akainacephalus itself is just really cool and unique, especially that skull ornamentation, the thorn head aspect.
Right, very distinctive look.
Yeah, but maybe more importantly, its potential phylogenetic position, its relationship to Asian ankylosaurs, really fuels that discussion about dinosaur biogeography. It strongly supports the idea that southern Laramidia had its own distinct fauna, possibly populated by separate migrations from Asia, different from what was happening up north.
That idea of provincialism seems really key here.
It does. It paints a much more complex picture of dinosaur evolution in North America during the Late Cretaceous. Not just one monolithic fauna, but regional differences.
Makes sense. So, final thought. Picturing Akainacephalus with all those neighbors, the giant crocs, the tyrannosaurs, all the other herbivores in that wet, swampy environment, what do you think daily life was like for this thorn-headed tank?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Probably involved a lot of eating low-lying plants and keeping a wary eye out for teratophonius. Definitely something fascinating to ponder.
Indeed it is. Well, thanks for walking us through this amazing discovery.
My pleasure. It's a great dinosaur to talk about.